There's a reason why a lot of bass anglers have an arsenal of rods and reels at hand, and that's because if you pair up the wrong rod and reel with the bait selection or the technique that you're using, you could lose a lot of fish or not even catch fish. I mean, the setup dramatically alters or improves the presentation and the hookup ratio and keeping the fish pinned. All of that makes a big, big difference on whether you catch fish or not. So let's talk about a variety of different baits and techniques here and the right, well, I wouldn't say right, but the recommended combo setup for you. So let's start with lipless crankbaits. Lipless crankbaits, typically you're bombing them out there long distances, you're covering vast amounts of water, and sometimes you get bit right on the end of a long cast. So you need a rod that can fling it out there, so a 7'2" to 7'6" rod, medium heavy power, fast action rod, so you can set that hook at the end of that long cast is what you want. As far as the reel, you want a relatively fast gear ratio, like a 7.1 to 8.5 to 1 gear ratio, something that moves fast. You move those vibrating jigs really quick, and you know, you can get a lot of fatigue at the end of the day, especially your forearms, you know, can start to hurt a little bit from all that cranking. So a little bit faster gear ratio helps in that area. And as for the line, I would use fluorocarbon line. 15-pound fluorocarbon line is plenty for a bait with treble hooks on it. If you use braid, braid has no stretch to it whatsoever, and the bass can use that as leverage to shake the bait off. Fluorocarbon's got some give to it, a little bit of stretch to it, so it's gonna, when the bass surges, it's gonna help keep them pinned, especially against that medium heavy power rod. You're gonna need something to give a little bit of give with those treble hooks to keep that fish pinned. So that's the setup I would use for lipless crankbaits. Now for spinnerbaits. Spinnerbaits, typically you're doing more targeting, you know, a little bit more pinpoint accuracy, close up somewhat, but you're going after docks and you're going along weed lines and pockets and aiming for stumps and trees and that sort of thing. So it's more you're aiming for things. So a little bit shorter rod in that 6'8" to 6'10" range. Medium heavy fast action rod is what I'm looking for. The reel gear ratio should be somewhere in that 6-to-1 to 7-to-1 range, because the spinnerbaits, typically you're bringing it back at a moderate speed. You're not, I mean, burning it all the way back or slow rolling it are two extremes of the way you can use a spinnerbait, but for the most part, most of your retrieves are at a moderate speed, so that gear ratio will suit you well for that range of retrieve speed. And then your line, 15-pound fluorocarbon line. That's like your jack of all trade line. You can use it around all kinds of cover and it will come through it really well. Braid is not as abrasion resistant as fluorocarbon is. And with spinnerbaits, you're throwing it around dock pilings, around rocks, you're throwing it around any bridge abutments, weeds, logs, you know, all kinds of different types of variety of cover. And fluorocarbon line is better suited for as an all general purpose line to go through all of that stuff with as little abrasion problems as possible. Swim jigs are super popular to use these days, and for good reason. They work really well. Now the nature of them, typically you're throwing around heavy cover and wood and laydowns and that sort of thing. So you need a rod and reel and line setup appropriate for that. So a rod that's in that 7.2 to 7.4 medium heavy fast action range is what you want, bait casting outfit. It's got that power to get that fish, you know, through all that cover. And you pair that with a reel that's like 6.1 to 7.1 to 1 gear ratio. It's got a little bit lower gear ratio, more torque then, a little bit more power to wrench them out of that cover. And you're pairing it with braided line, usually 50-pound braided line, because those fish can come unbuttoned and they can wrap you up in all that cover. And so you need some stouter equipment. And that line, and this is where braid comes in handy. Braid works really well in vegetation. It's like designed for vegetation and for woody type cover, and this is perfect for a swim jig. Vibrating jigs are super popular, and again, with the way that you fish them, you're usually fishing in and around cover. So a little bit longer rod, you're making long casts with this too. So 7'2" to 7'6", medium heavy, moderate action rod. You want more tip in this case. Not a fast action, but a moderate fast action rod. It's got some more bend and tip in it. You want that when the fish takes it, give a little more time for the fish to grab a hold of it, and you can set that hook and you'll keep that fish pinned. So that's kind of a key difference with this type of rod than the other rods we're talking about. And you want to use a reel that's in the 6-to-1 to 7-to-1 gear ratio range, because you're bringing it back again at a moderate speed. So you're not burning it back to the boat real quick. You just slow to moderate speed, so that medium gear ratio works perfect for that. And then for your line, it can work well for both braid and fluorocarbon. But going back to what I was saying before, fluorocarbon is more versatile, and with a vibrating jig, you can go in a variety of different locations. You're not exactly sure where you're going to be throwing it all the time. So you have more versatility with fluorocarbon. So 15-pound fluorocarbon line is something that I would use so I can have maximum amount of targets I can throw to with that vibrating jig. All right, jerkbaits. Now this gets a little dicey when we're talking about jerkbaits, because you have the deep diving jerkbaits. And for those, I would use a bait casting outfit. And with jerkbaits, you've got the diving, the twitching action, the movement, and you've got those little bit of treble hooks on them. So it's a little like, what do I use? With those, the jerkbaits, here's the thing. A lot of times you're twitching and jerking it, and you're pointing the rod tip towards the water. So a shorter rod is better for that. So like a 6'6", 6'10" rod is best for this application. And you want a rod that's medium power, fast action. It's real tempting to use a harder or more stouter rod, but with those little treble hooks in there, the fish can rip it free. And so you need something that's going to give some bend and flex while the fish is fighting. So that's the type of rod I would use for bait casting. And if you're using the really lighter, smaller jerkbaits, then spinning is better for that. And for a spinning rod, I would use like a 7-foot medium power fast action rod. A lot of times those are more at the surface, and so you're not pointing the rod so much to the water as you are pulling it to the side. So a little bit longer rod works for that. And that again helps keep the fish pinned once they're hooked. You got that leverage, but it's still a medium power. It's got a lot of parabolic, spring, spongy action. The fish surges, you've got that ability to keep them pinned. The reel, you don't need a fast reel. Most of the time fish strike during the pause. So it's the speed of the retrieve is not as essential. It's really the pause. So a 6.1 to 7.1 to 1 gear ratio reel is perfectly suitable and fine. You want a really good smooth drag. That's really important when you're dealing with these thin treble hooks. And when you're using a spinning gear, you want like a size 2500 reel. You don't really need the big giant ones, the 3000 or larger. A 2500 is really perfectly suited for those smaller jerkbaits and lighter jerkbaits. That smaller reel does a better job of casting it out there further. Line, if I'm using bait casting, I would have 12-pound, and if I'm using spinning, it would be 8-pound. In both cases, fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon, again, it has that stretch factor to it. When you're using treble hooks, you want some give. The braid doesn't do that. And braid is a bit buoyant too. If you're trying to get that jerkbait down to deeper depth, the braid will fight against that and won't let it get down as deep. This is why those smaller jerkbaits, I'll also use 8-pound test, because it gets that smaller jerkbait down deeper. And it enables me to fish areas that other fishermen, where their bait's going over the top of the fish and missing them. So that fluorocarbon line is real important in that setup. For Carolina rigs, you're using that typically in deeper water. You're making long casts across deep points, rock piles, humps, ledges, deep structure. That's where the Carolina rig reigns supreme. And so you need a little bit longer rod to get it out there, and also for those hook sets at the end of a long cast. So 7'2" to 7'8" rod is what you're looking for, bait casting. Heavy power, fast action rod to lob that whole setup out there. It takes a little bit of casting power, and so that rod's going to help you lob it out there further. And it's also going to give you that leverage for setting that hook in deeper water. Now, for the reel, a 6.1 to 7.1 reel is perfectly fine. You're not moving it super fast. So that's a moderate speed gear ratio. It's perfectly fine for that setup. Line is where it becomes kind of tricky. A lot of guys like to use braid as the main line. And I'm not gonna say that's wrong. You can do that, but going back to the abrasion resistance, especially when you're using it on rocks and hard bottom and that sort of thing, fluorocarbon has an advantage there. The difference is you're throwing it way out there and there is that stretch factor, whereas braid doesn't have that stretch factor. So there's 6 of one, half dozen another. You're trading off stretch and abrasion resistance regardless of which line you use, but I opt for fluorocarbon. And your tag line, your leader, that's what's really important. A lot of people use fluorocarbon there, and this is where I differentiate. I use 2 foot to 4 foot leader, and I'm using monofilament. The key thing, the key advantage that a Carolina rig has is you're lifting and dropping that weight, the bait flutters up and then it slowly falls weightless back down. If you're using braid, braid is buoyant, and that kind of inhibits the fall. It makes the bait look weird. Actually, instead of falling horizontally or maybe nose down, it actually goes tail down, or it just falls weird. It doesn't look natural. Use fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon sinks, and it makes it fall faster. And the whole advantage is to keep that bait up. So monofilament, it floats. And monofilament, in my opinion, is the best way to do it. That bait slowly falls down now. It looks much more natural in the water. And I feel I get more strikes that way. So, I use a 12 to 15 pound leader, and then my main line is usually 25 to 45 pound line. Squarebill crankbaits are super popular because you can fish them around all kinds of shallow cover. The key thing is getting the right rod and reel set up for them, because you want something that's soft enough to be able to keep the fish buttoned when he's hooked, but you want it strong enough that you control the fish rather than the fish controlling you. So here you want a medium heavy fast action rod and a shorter rod, 6'8" to 6'10", because you're doing target casting here, not long distance casting with a squarebill. Typically, you're throwing to docks or to isolated cover and laydowns and that sort of thing. So a shorter rod enables you to make better, more accurate casts. You pair that with a reel. This is the fun part. In the colder months, you're bringing that bait back slower, whereas in the summer, you're almost burning it back. So having a reel that's in like the 6-to-1 to 7-to-1 gear ratio, that whole range, you can bring it back slow and fast without having to change or have different reels. So it kind of carries that throughout the whole season, you can use that one reel. As for line, fluorocarbon gets the nod here for a lot of the reasons I just mentioned. Again, you're around cover, fluorocarbon is more abrasion resistant than braid, and it's got that stretch to help keep that fish pinned. All right, let's talk jigs. Jigs, for the most part, you use that for flipping and pitching. You're throwing into heavy cover, flooded bushes, thick weeds, or around timber, that kind of stuff, or snaggy stuff. We can get hung up in it, or more importantly, if a bass hits it, he can pull you back down in there and wrap up around those weeds and you'll lose them. So you're gonna need stout equipment for this. This is hand-to-hand combat, guys. So a heavy power, fast or extra fast action rod is what you want. It's commonly called a flipping stick. Typically a 7'4", 7'6" longer rod give you that leverage to pull them out. You're not looking for long casts here. You're looking for good long pitches and flips. And a longer rod will help you do that. Plus it gives you that leverage to get the fish out. You pair that with 50-pound braided line. Yeah, it's stout stuff here. But those jigs have a real strong hook on them. Typically they're a flipping hook on it. Or if you're doing a Texas rig on it, it's a flipping hook. Something real strong that can withstand the pressure that you're giving it. And then your reel, you don't need a fast moving reel here. This is where it gets a little bit controversial. I like lower gear ratio reels for this because they have more torque. You can wrench that fish out of there. Just like a winch, you can get him out of that cover. So I like something with a lower gear ratio. Some guys like a little bit higher gear ratio because they'll do a flip or a pitch, and once that lure's out there, they can reel it up really quick and cast again. And they can be more efficient and get more casts in at the end of the day. to me, it's like once I get that bite, I want to make sure that he makes it in the boat. So I want to put everything in my favor. So I usually go to a 6:1 to 6:3 gear ratio. You can bump it up to that closer to 7:1 if you want something you can reel in the lure a lot faster. Personal preference there, but make sure it has a strong drag. Nothing less than 14-pound drag. I like 20 plus. 20-pound drag, 22-pound drags, 24-pound drag. Something, I lock it down. I winch that thing down and make sure that it's nice and snug so I get a good powerful hook set, get him out away from that cover, and then I can back off on the drag and fight on the way back to the boat. That's just how I do it. Let's talk about Texas rig plastics. Now, Texas rig plastics, there's two different setups for that. One is if you're flipping and pitching it a cover, and it's just like the jigs that we just mentioned, so I'm not going to go over that. Just make sure that you're using a hook designed for that. So they're sometimes called a flipping hook. There's sometimes they're called a super line hook, depends on the manufacturer, but a stout hook so it can stand up to that strong rod and reel in line. That's all you need for that. Now, if you're casting around sparse cover or open water or scattered weeds, you're casting around docks, scattered boulders, points, that sort of stuff, you can lighten up a bit. And you can get longer casts that way too. So with this setup, this is kind of a multi-purpose all setup type of combination I use. 7'1" medium heavy fast action bait casting rod. And I pair that with 15-pound fluorocarbon line. Like I've mentioned earlier, fluorocarbon is more versatile. In this situation, same thing. You're going to be casting around all kinds of things, so I want the versatility of fluorocarbon. Plus, it's you can't see it as well in the water. It's more invisible. And when you're fishing in open water, that matters. Earlier I was saying fishing the braided, but with braid you're throwing in thick weeds and cover. That kind of camouflages the line anyway. But when you're fishing out in open water, the fluorocarbon, it's less visible. That makes a difference. Pair that with a 6.5 to 7:1 gear ratio reel. And again, the drag on that matters. I like nothing less than 14-pound drag on that. It doesn't have to be 20-pound drag because you're not trying to wrench them out of cover, but that 15, 16, 14, around in there, that's good pound drag for that. You get a good hook set on them. You don't need a heavy hook on it, just a regular power hook for this type of fishing, and you're good to go. Let's talk about topwaters. Now, topwaters, they got treble hooks on them, and they're usually a lighter bait. So it's similar to a crankbait setup here. You're using a medium power or moderate power rod, 7'2" to 7'4", fast action rod. Right? That's like you're going to be able to throw pop-Rs and Zara spooks and walking baits. You'll be able to fish prop baits, both single and double prop baits, a variety of different topwaters with this. It's got that flex to it so you can cast that lighter bait out there. It can load up and help you fling it out there further. Plus it's got that bend and flexibility in it so that if you do hook a fish, it doesn't rip those treble hooks out. It can give and bend and flex with the fight of the fish and keep them pinned. That's the key thing. The line is different here. Here is where I'll use monofilament line. 12-pound or up to 15-pound monofilament line. Why? The key thing here is monofilament floats. And when you're working a chugging bait or something that needs to sit on the top like a prop bait, any other line will sink below the surface and will pull it down, and it's harder to work that way. So that floating line is key to getting the correct presentation and cadence. So monofilament, and also it's got that stretch. So you're working with treble hooks again, so that stretch is going to help give along with the spring action of that rod, and it's going to keep that fish pinned. The reel here, the reel is very simple. You get a medium speed, anywhere from the 6.5 to 7.1 to 1 gear ratio reel is fine for this application. You don't need a super strong drag because you're dealing with treble hooks, so 12-pound is fine. 12 to 15-pound drag is suitable for this type of setup. Okay, let's talk about finesse setups. Finesse, we're talking drop shot, split shot, Ned rig, right? That sort of stuff. These are the things that require lighter line. So in lighter rods, these are light baits. So here we're using spinning outfit. And it's a medium power, fast action rod, 7'1". This is something that has been around since the days of split shotting and drop shotting came out in the 80s, and it still works today for virtually every finesse tactic. That's the rod you're gonna have. Your line is gonna be straight up fluorocarbon line for a variety of reasons. Fluorocarbon, as I mentioned before, is more abrasion resistant. Typically, you're fishing finesse baits in open water, in hard bottom, rocks, boulders, that sort of thing. Some weeds, but typically it's harder cover, and your fluorocarbon is going to hold up better. Again, open water, so fluorocarbon is less visible in open water. You've got the sensitivity, and it sinks. This is what I really like about fluorocarbon for finesse tactics. It sinks with the bait, and it acts more natural with the bait, so it moves with the bait. And with you have braid's got some buoyancy to it. So when you, between your bait and your rod, you've got this bend. And so you have more line out than with fluorocarbon. It's more of a straight connection because it sinks. So you have less line out, especially when you fish in deep water. You have a more direct connection to your bait, so greater sensitivity there. And fluorocarbon to me is, it works more natural with the bait, especially if you're going to these lighter lines. You're looking at 6-pound test. That's what I use. I use 6-pound test fluorocarbon. Now, when I first started doing finesse tactics, I used 10-pound, actually 10-pound mono, then I went to 10-pound copolymer, and then finally 10-pound fluorocarbon, and then worked my way to 6-pound as I got better with hooking the fish, fighting them back to the boat, and I got more confident in using lighter line. But that 6-pound, it makes a big difference. I get more bites with 6-pound than I do 8, because it's just more fluid, it's more natural, it does not restrict the bait, especially when you're using a drop shot setup. But even with split shot and Ned rigs, it just works more, just more natural presentation. And that makes a big difference when you're using finesse tactics. Use a spinning reel, size 2500 spinning reel. Some manufacturers call it size 25, same thing. They just like to be different. And the key thing here is your drag. Not so much a strong drag, but a smooth drag. So, and the other thing that the fluorocarbon has, by the way, is that give. It's got a little bit of stretch, and that works great when you're using light wire hooks here. So, you know, if you use a braid, it has no stretch whatsoever. It's going to put all the pressure on that hook. With a light wire hook, you're apt to rip the fish, the hook out of the fish's face, or bend that hook out, or maybe a little bit of both. Either way, it equates to a lost fish. So fluorocarbon works much more to your advantage here with finesse tactics. Shaky heads. Let's talk about that. The right setup for that. Typically, shaky heads are a lot lighter. It's more of a finesse tactic. So you're using spinning gear in this instance. The one that I find that works the best is a 7'1" medium power fast action rod. I can use that in a variety of different depths and ranges and type of cover using a shaky head. It's got that light action and light power to be able to fling it out there, and with that light hook you can keep the fish pinned. Again, it's got that give. It works as a shock absorber when you're fighting that fish back to help keep him pinned and he doesn't shake loose. Pair that with a size 2500 spinning reel. The key thing with that is having a nice smooth drag because you're using lighter line and those thinner hooks. So you want that reel to peel off that line nice and smooth when it demands it, and you won't put too much strain on your rod or your line or your hook for that matter. As for line, I'm using 8-pound, oftentimes 6-pound fluorocarbon line. Most finesse techniques, that's what I'm using. Even a 6-pound fluorocarbon line just acts a lot more natural in the water. It really makes a huge difference. The difference between 6 and 8 is a huge difference as far as I get more bites. The bait just acts more natural in the water, and it doesn't give off any negative vibes, in my opinion. The fish get, you know, they bite more often. So 6-pound, the fluorocarbon, it sinks along with the bait, and it's still very, very sensitive. And again, it's got that stretch factor when the fish is fighting it, has that give and keeps them pinned. Now, lastly, I want to talk about buzzbaits. Buzzbaits, it really depends on where you live and what kind of cover that you're fishing. Buzzbaits you can typically throw in and around and over the tops of heavy cover. Up north, we sometimes don't get as much thick cover as you do down south, and sometimes even that doesn't matter. It depends on the lake that you're at. But if you're fishing relatively moderate cover or open water, long casts reign supreme. So now you're using a 7'2" to 7'4" medium heavy fast action rod. You've got a good thick hook on that, so you want a little bit of power to it when you set the hook at the end of a long cast. So that works really well for you. If you're doing closer in combat type fishing, maybe fishing it to flooded bushes or something, maybe move it down to a 7'1" rod. Your reel is going to be that 6.5 to 7.5 gear ratio, a little bit up. We're knocking it up a little bit of notch, a little bit faster gear ratio. You can even go up to an 8.1 if you really want to burn it back. But typically with a buzzbait, you want to bring it back just fast enough where it stays on the surface and no faster than that. So a 6.5 to 7.1 is about the right range for that. The line is really what makes the difference. If you're going over super heavy cover and heavy matted vegetation, that kind of stuff, then braid is the way to go. That fish buries up in that stuff. You've got the braid, you can wrench them out of there. You've got that thick, stout hook on the buzzbait so you can stand up to that pressure. So, 50-pound braid works really well. But if you don't have that kind of stuff, then that's overkill. And 15-pound fluorocarbon line works best. I find that I can get easier casting with that. And again, it doesn't show up as well as the line going across the water. It's a visibility thing. I don't know whether the bass can actually see that and make a decision. Oh, that's got line. I'm not going to bite it. Or maybe they don't see it at all. I don't know. But to me, I feel a little bit better, especially when fishing in clear water over the top of, say, a boulder field, for example. That's clear water. Using fluorocarbon line, I know that it's not visible to the fish. So you kind of have to look at what you're fishing to determine what type of line to use in that instance. So I hope with those guidance helps with the variety of most of the baits you're going to be using this season. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.